All right, today we are tackling something massive, the story of India. We're talking about a journey that stretches back thousands of years, packed with incredible empires and ideas that have shaped, well, about a sixth of the entire human race. So that brings up a pretty obvious question, right? How in the world do you cover 5,000 years of history in just a few minutes? It sounds totally impossible. A simple list of kings and battles? That would barely scratch the surface. Well, the trick is we're not going to try that. Instead, we're going to focus on 5 great shifts. These aren't just states you memorize for a test. They are the absolute game-changing moments in ideas, in power, in identity that completely change the direction of the subcontinent. Okay, let's dive right in. Our first big shift takes us all the way back to the very dawn of civilization here, looking at the foundational ideas that would echo for centuries and centuries to come. So our story kicks off in the Indus Valley, and you've got to forget any idea of some primitive society. We are talking about seriously advanced cities. Planned out with grid systems, sophisticated drainage. This is happening thousands of years ago. These guys were true pioneers, giving the world its very first cotton and building these huge trade networks that went all the way to Mesopotamia. Now, after this incredible urban phase, a powerful new set of ideas starts to take shape during what we call the Vedic Age. At the very heart of it all were the Vedas, the oldest sacred texts in Hinduism. They were believed to be a parashaya, which means not of human origin, but a divine gift. And these texts, they really laid the groundwork for Indian philosophy and for a structured social order known as the Varna system. And out of this intellectual ferment, 2 major new philosophical paths emerged: Jainism and Buddhism. Now, both were seeking enlightenment, or moksha, but they had different ways of getting there. Jainism, with its text in Prakrit, really emphasized 5 vows, especially ahimsa, or total nonviolence. Buddhism, on the other hand, with its literature in Pali, focused on the 4 noble truths and an 8-fold path to end suffering. And here's where things get really interesting. So once these foundational ideas are in place, the next big shift is political. This is huge. For the first time ever, we start to see the rise of these massive empires and the very idea of a unified India. At the forefront of this was the Mauryan Empire, and of course its most famous ruler, Ashoka. But his real genius wasn't just in conquest, it was in communication. He had his policies and his philosophy carved onto pillars and rocks all across the land, the famous Ashokan edicts. Think about that for a second. It was the first time any ruler had ever tried to speak directly to the people of an entire subcontinent. But for Ashoka, this was deeply personal. After this incredibly bloody war in Kalinga, he had a complete change of heart. He totally shifted his philosophy of rule from Bidigosha, which is basically conquest by war, to Dhammagosha, which is more like a cultural conquest, spreading principles of right conduct. For an emperor at that time, that idea was absolutely revolutionary. Then, after the Mauryas, we get the Gupta Empire, which really ushered in what people call India's classical age. And it really was a golden era, an explosion of creativity and achievement in science, math, art, you name it. This is the period that gave us geniuses like the playwright Kalidasa and one of the world's first great universities at Nalanda. Okay, so our next big shift is all about new arrivals. It was driven by new powers coming in from the northwest. And this wasn't just a simple change of rulers. We're talking about a deep cultural fusion, a great synthesis that would reshape the subcontinent forever. This whole new era really kicks off with the Delhi Sultanate. This was a series of 5 different dynasties that established the first major Islamic rule in India. And as you can see, from the slave dynasty all the way to the Lodis, each one left its own unique mark, and really they set the stage for the next great empire to come. And that stage was set for the legendary Mughal Empire. Babur founded it, and this dynasty left a legacy that's, well, literally set in stone. You had Akbar the Great, a genius of administration and religious tolerance. You had Shah Jahan, who gave the world the absolute wonder that is the Taj Mahal. And then you had Aurangzeb, who pushed the empire to its largest size, even while his policies kind of sowed the seeds of its eventual decline. And now for a shift that would completely redraw the map and reorder everything. The arrival of European trading companies. What started out as a business trip, let's say, would end up transforming the subcontinent's economy, its politics, its power structures forever. It wasn't a sudden invasion. It happened piece by piece over a long time. The Portuguese got there first, back in 1498. Then came the Dutch, then the British, then the French. And for more than a century, they all competed for trade and influence, slowly but surely, shifting the balance of power. So all this growing British power, run by the East India Company, finally just boiled over in 1857. The Great Revolt was this massive, widespread rebellion that just exploded across northern India. It was, without a doubt, the single biggest challenge the company had ever faced. But for all its fire and fury, the revolt didn't succeed. So why not? Well, it came down to a few key things. It was mostly contained in the north. There was no real central leadership. The rebels couldn't agree on what a post-British India would even look like. And at the end of the day, the British just had a stronger, more organized military. And the result of that failure? It was huge. And it was immediate. The British government stepped in, passed the Government of India Act of 1858, got rid of the East India Company, and put India under the direct rule of the British Crown. The British Raj had officially begun. And that brings us to our fifth and final shift: the rise of Indian nationalism and the long, incredibly complex struggle for freedom. This, right here, is the story of the birth of modern India. One of the first big moves was the creation of the Indian National Congress in 1885. This was a game changer because for the first time, there was a single national platform for Indians to make their political demands heard. It started off moderate, but it planted the seeds for a massive movement. And then that movement was absolutely electrified by the arrival of Mahatma Gandhi. He brought this powerful new idea with him, satyagraha, or nonviolent resistance. And he didn't just talk about it, he put it to the test in these early campaigns, in Champaran for farmers and in Ahmedabad and Kedah for workers and peasants. These were his testing grounds. Those early wins built incredible momentum, and the entire goal of the movement began to shift. Then, at the Lahore session in 1929, the Indian National Congress, with Jawaharlal Nehru at the helm, made a historic declaration. The goal wasn't just about reform anymore. It was Purna Swaraj, complete independence, nothing less. And so, after all these centuries, after all these massive shifts and transformations, the destination was finally clear. The goal of complete independence united millions. But as everyone would soon find out, the path to actually getting there and figuring out what this new nation would even become was going to be anything but simple.